Welcome, everyone, to Bet What Happens Live for the final Thanksgiving game. This one between the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco leading by a score of 21-3. They have the ball in Seattle territory in the red zone after a muffed punt. I have my predictive analytics colleague, Billy Ward, here with me. Billy, thoughts in the game, thoughts on betting this one? Kind of a weird one with it being 21-3.
Yeah, it's definitely a ugly game, and it makes it hard to really know how this one's going to go. In theory, we would expect Seattle to come out aggressively, trying to really run up or catch back up on the score. But are they really even going to try at this point? Is this going to be a competitive game? And can they get anything going? San Francisco's defense is just so good; it makes it hard.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just one of those where we're going to kind of, we have the in-game player prop model, but we're also going to have to apply some football knowledge to, potentially if this does blow out, potentially some backups or just, Seattle giving up and running out clock, that kind of stuff. So it's a little tough to say, but obviously if you're Seattle, you're not giving up right now. It's 18 points. That's 3 scores. If you hold San Francisco to a field goal here, it's 21 points. That's 3 touchdowns. It is not inconceivable to make this a one possession game late in the game. So I think at this point in the game, we can definitely still go by the model for most of this, with a slight lean towards what happens if this blows out.
Yeah, I guess the way I'd be approaching it is if the model likes an under, I'm going to feel on a starter. If the model likes unders on a starter, I'm going to be real confident in that. If the model likes over, that's where we're going to need to be a little bit more cautious. Just we don't know that that's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and same thing, with the total here. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're good. I was just saying San Francisco's about to kick a field goal here. They're 4th and 2. Right. So we're about to be potentially in 24-3 territory.
Yeah, and I was going to say with the total, everything in theory points to the over, right? We're going to have 27 points at halftime. The total is dropped to flash 46.5, but now it's 49.5. But still, less than the points have already been scored this half. I talked about in the article, but under Pete Carroll, Seattle has fairly consistently, they try to play slow, they try to keep things close, and then they unleash the downfield passing if and when they needed to, or late in the game. They're obviously at that point now, right? Down 3 scores going into halftime. If you think Seattle can get anything going or has any chance to get the wide receivers involved, the over makes a ton of sense. I'm just not confident enough. I don't know if Gino's fully right. He came into this game with the weird elbow or tricep or whatever the injury was. Obviously, Drew Lock coming in doesn't make things better for anyone either. So the numbers are telling me over, but my brain is saying this is probably not one that I want to pull the trigger on.
Yeah, as far as the game total, it's you're right. It's hard to pull the trigger on a live over. But I will say Drew Lock coming in when he was in earlier, Jackson Smith and Jigba got a lot of targets from him. So I don't think this necessarily hurts him. This is actually something Sean Kerner and I, our boss, discussed prior to this was Drew Lock doesn't necessarily hurt him here, maybe even slightly helps him. So, just a spot where even if Drew Lock comes in, Seattle probably will want to get him some work and get him some reps, just because in case this turns into a longer thing with Geno Smith. So I don't hate potentially some Seattle passing overs, but again, I would definitely like to show a good chunk of value on them if I'm going to bet the overs. But I think you're right. If we're showing value on some starters unders, then you feel even better about that, knowing we might lean slightly towards some potential backups coming in or getting more reps here. So while we are in that line of thinking, what are you thinking about, player props or anything like that?
The obvious one for me right now is Geno Smith under passing attempts, I should say. Under 29.5 is even money. And, traditionally the logic would be his team's down, they're going to throw more. They've been down all game. He has 7 pass attempts at halftime. The pregame line was 35.5, I think, most places. So saying about 18 pass attempts per half, he would need to get 23 to go over this in, the last minute of this drive or of this half. In the second half, if this one gets to be a blowout, he's probably getting pulled. San Francisco plays so slow anyway, and they're definitely going to play slow with the big lead they have. Even if they do come out firing, they just might not get enough plays to get him another 23 pass attempts. Plus, we get all the benefits of if we see Drew Lock come in, if it's a blowout. There's so many more ways for this to go under than there is for it to go over, and especially for slightly better line on the under, this one feels pretty obvious.
Yeah, so right now Geno Smith has 7 pass attempts. He is 2 for 7 and 29.5. That means he would need 23 more the rest of the game. We're projecting 22 more. So we're already projecting under, and then we add in the potential under for maybe a Drew Lock replacement. I think we got to lock this one in, Billy. So we're going to take
came into this game.
I was going to say, we're just live bet alert. We're officially taking that Geno Smith under 29.5 passing attempts. Go ahead with your thought there.
No, even though he came back in last week, Geno didn't seem right at the end of the game last week. There's something going on with that injury. I think they're trying to hide him to an extent. And if you're Seattle, once this one's even kind of out of hand, there's no reason to push that one, right? Like, I think the risk of him getting pulled is a lot, or the odds of him getting pulled are a lot higher than they would be on a normal game because of the short week and the injury.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in the chat here, somebody's asking about Geno under 16.5 completions. I'm not quite there, and I actually do see it ghosted up to 17.5 at DraftKings. I'm not quite there because he could just take a bunch of shorter passes knowing his arm is injured. I'd prefer the passing attempts because we're showing value on that. And for as far as under 16.5 completions, we're actually showing 17. So we're showing slight value to the over there, like very, very thin, not bettable. So I would just rather stick with the under on the attempts there for Geno Smith. I also see somebody asking, Billy, so we're talking about potentially backups here, right? And McCaffrey, obviously, I think San Francisco will want to keep him healthy. So what about Elijah Mitchell over on his rushing yards? Now he has 2 right now. And I'm showing, as far as his median, 12.5, but that is not counting the fact that he could be subbed in. So I'm a long way to getting the 26.5 rushing yards where his prop is. Right now I'm at 12.5 for rushing yards. So even though they could lean on Mitchell more, I don't think we're there yet in terms of like guaranteeing that he will be the guy in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and if I were going to do that now, I think I prefer his rushing attempts because over 5.5 is plus 110 at DraftKings. So, like, you don't even need that to hit 50% of the time. He'll probably get his looks. Even in closer games, we would expect him to get probably 2 or 3 more, I'd guess, in the second half, despite just having the one now. If I'm going to take a thinner shot early like that, I would rather get it at plus money than have to rely on efficiency and opportunity both to be there.
Exactly.
With the attempts, you just need him to get handed the ball. It doesn't matter how it goes.
And it is a little speculative, right? Like we're speculating that this game stays like this, that Geno continues to have issues, but Seattle's kicking a field goal right here. And they're going to start with the ball in the second half. They have a chance to close this game by 10 points before San Francisco gets the ball back. So just one of those spots where all of a sudden, if it's 10 points closer, if it's 24-13, is San Francisco replacing Christian McCaffrey with Mitchell? Maybe not until it's like real late in the game. So it's not a spot I want to dive into right now, given the game situation.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like I said, if you can find something plus money and juicy and want to take a little bit longer stab at that makes a little more sense than something that you need to hit 60% of the time when we don't really know how this is going to go before they see the ball again.
Yeah, exactly. So Seattle is lining up for the kick here. It's about a 52-yarder, 52, 53 yards in that range. And so we're just going to have to see how this goes. This is going to run out the clock, and that is no good. Not even close to being good. So that, pipe dream of Seattle, maybe for them, closing it by 10 points over the next couple possessions is not going to be that. So at most they'll be able to close it by 7 points because they are starting with the ball in the second half. So we are at halftime. Just to reset a little bit here. It is 24-3, San Francisco leading their NFC West division rival, the Seattle Seahawks. Looking at money lines right now, because I always like to look at those, just kind of get an idea of where the game state is at. Well, it's locked at FanDuel, and DraftKings has minus 500 on the money line for San Francisco and plus 35 to 1. Let's 35 to 1. So yeah, pretty much 97, 98% San Francisco winning this game. So that's where we stand. The live total 48.5, the live spread 21.5, and of course San Francisco leads by 21. So that's where the reset is as we head into halftime, Billy.
Yeah, and real quick, I'm just looking around. If you're interested in getting some Elijah Mitchell action, anytime touchdown is plus 1,000 right now at DraftKings. I'm checking the FanDuel line right now. Something like that, just to take a little bit sprinkle, I would prefer over, a straight line on his yards or carries or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree with that. So we're at halftime. I'm just real quick going to pop in these. I think a couple things that are easy knockouts for us is in terms of like things we might want to look at are passing yards for each of the quarterbacks, passing interceptions for them, because we have their live interception lines pretty easily calculatable. So for Geno Smith, we have a projection of 223.5. Now, of course, Seattle's starting with the ball, so maybe we mentally adjust it up a little bit, but maybe it gets pulled, so maybe we mentally adjust it down a little bit. So just as far as our model, we have Geno Smith at 223.5. His live line is 197.5 at DraftKings. At FanDuel, they don't even have him up there, so they may be worried about him getting pulled as well. So I don't think we can take his over. Brock Purdy is at 205.5 at FanDuel, and at DraftKings he is at 210.5. Our model has 223.5. Now he's at 134 right now. So obviously we're showing some overvalue there, but I don't know how comfortable I feel with that either.
I feel better with the Purdy just because they're still going to throw some short passes. And when you've got, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle, short passes can turn into a lot of yards in a hurry. It's why he's been such a valuable fantasy asset with all those guys. So especially the FanDuel 205, it's only 70 more yards. They basically need to even be remotely trying for 2 more drives. And at the efficiency they've been playing, they should get there. So I like that at FanDuel. DraftKings, it's pushing it a little bit with that number. Don't feel good about Geno. We saw him look efficient here for basically 4 plays at the end of the half and no other point this game. So really hard to feel good about Geno outside of that. Hurry up.
Yeah, I will
series.
say Brock Purdy, if we just use our projection and the 205.5 line at FanDuel, we're showing 64.5% to the over. Again, they're not starting with the ball, but Seattle does have a chance to close the gap a little bit, which would, again, make it a little bit more likely that San Francisco makes some extra passes. Doesn't have to be as necessarily in a heavy run script. So I kind of like the over there, Billy. What do you think?
I'm good with the FanDuel one if you are at the 205.5.
Yeah, let's
the 210
do over.
would be, like I said, just too much.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, I mean, that's essentially an extra completion there, at least half a completion to a completion in a shorter passing game. So we're going to go over 205.5 passing yards for Brock Purdy as our second bet here on Bet What Happens Live. The other thing, Billy, I know, we were talking about overs, unders, things of that nature. So this game should theoretically play towards some, like you said, towards some overs if San Francisco is leading. And in terms of actually San Francisco leading, they're actually the slower of the two teams. So Seattle is starting with the ball, which would be the faster of the two teams, especially relative to the game situation. So is there any value in over 47.5? Is there any value in maybe Seattle closing the gap on a side or something like that?
Yeah, I just saw it tick down to 47.5. It had been 48.5, which, that's a key number right now with 27 on the board because getting the 21. I don't love it. And it's hard, trying to decide between math and football brain. But I guess we saw enough out of Geno there at the end that I think we can take the 47.5. It's 3 touchdowns. You figure San Francisco scores 1 or 2 more, even if it is a blowout. So it doesn't take a lot for that one to cover.
Right.
And
we're at 27.
Seattle starting with the ball. So
we're at 27. The full game was 43.5, depending on, where you got it at close. which would theoretically kind of play towards like around 21, 22. If we exactly divided it evenly and knowing the faster pace, seeing Geno be a little more efficient, I think I could get behind over 47.5. I already had the over. This is a luck over, by the way. Just throwing it out there. If you are avid followers of the luck rankings, this is a luck over. So do you want to pull the trigger on the over? We got to be careful because the juice is different at different sites.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to pay a little bit more juice as long as I'm getting the 47.5 rather than the 48.5 like that. There's certain numbers where I'm not going to sacrifice the juice to do that. But I did say in my, live betting before this one that this one was probably going to be an over, kind of no matter what, other than a super close game, just because Seattle plays really close unless they're or plays somewhat slow unless they're trailing. San Fran kind of plays slow no matter what, but they're so efficient that it kind of breaks how I analyze these to an extent because they score a lot of points without playing fast, which we don't really account for when we're just looking at pace. So I'm with it. It looks like FanDuel might be the best one, over 47.5 minus 114. Are you saying
there's an
better?
over, there's an over 47 minus 110 at Caesars. So you gotta you definitely don't want to take 47.5 when you got 47 at lower juice at Caesars. So minus 110 over 47 at Caesars. I think Billy and I can both get behind that, simply because I mean, all the other sites are 47.5 at a little bit longer juice. Bet 365 if you don't have Caesars available, you bet 365 has 47.5 minus 105, which is better juice than FanDuel. But getting that extra half a points where you can push out of 47 in case that happens, because 20 points is certainly a reasonable number to have happen occasionally. I like that a lot. So we're gonna take over 47 minus 110 at Caesars. And you were talking about touchdowns, so I think we got to look at some anytime touchdown score props just to make sure we check that off the board.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite, I'm sticking with it. The line has dropped a little bit, so it's a little bit tougher, but I do like Elijah Mitchell a lot. He's going to get his touches unless this one gets super close. San Francisco is going to want to run the ball. We saw last week, I think he got one towards the end of the game, and then they tried to get it McCaffrey, another one to keep the streak going. That was 2 weeks ago, I'm sorry. But, he's going to be involved even if this one gets somewhat closer at real long odds. If you can still find something around that plus 1,000 he was at, it looks like DraftKings has dropped him down to 550 and FanDuel was 750 last I looked.
Yeah, so FanDuel right now, FanDuel is at 7-1. But if you have Bet 365 available to you, 11-1 for a second half anytime touchdown score for Elijah Mitchell would be the best value. Now, our model isn't quite showing value on that, but again, that's based off pregame usage. We do think there could be a shift in usage toward Elijah Mitchell, and going from 11-1 to 12-1 isn't the same as going from like even money to 2-1. That's a much bigger jump in terms of implied probability than 11-12. So I think if you want to mentally shift some usage towards Elijah Mitchell, I think you can play 11-1 at Bet 365 for a second half anytime touchdown score. Maybe probably more like 8 or 9-1 would be fair value on that. So I could get behind 11-1. You're saying 10 or 11 or so. So I think we're gonna roll with that one. Let's do like a quarter unit on that. 11-1. If you have Bet 365 available to you, I wouldn't go below 10-1 like Billy was saying. Make sure you can get double digits on Elijah Mitchell. But if you do have 11-1 available to you at Bet 365, second half touchdown score, we're going to go a quarter unit on that one. What else are you thinking as far as touchdown scores? Because there's still going to be points scored most likely in the second half.
We're hoping based on what we've bet so far, but
exactly.
Yeah, the other one I was looking at, and we talked about a little bit, is Jackson Smith-Njigba. Seems to have a little bit of more chemistry with Drew Lock if we do see Drew Lock in the second half. And he hasn't gotten much usage yet, but Geno's only completed 6 passes. I think 3 of them were in that last series. So it's not like, his market share is incredibly low. It's just they haven't completed passes to anybody. I'm trying to find the best line on him right now. 6-1, probably not quite enough. What are we showing on Jackson Smith-Njigba?
Yeah, it's funny. We're showing and I did have anytime touchdown value on him in pregame, but right now we're not showing enough value at at 7-1, 6-1, anywhere in that range. We actually have closer to 9.5-1, so plus 950. Now Seattle is starting with the ball, so maybe plus 900, plus 850 at the best, but unfortunately not working out there for him on the anytime touchdown market. I'm just real quick scrolling through some of these. We're not showing value on any of these Seattle players, it looks like, which is funny because I definitely liked Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I bet his anytime touchdown coming into the game. We're showing value in George Kittle. Now, if Seattle were to close this up on this drive, I could certainly see that being a reasonable possibility. I did bet George Kittle pregame, but it seems like FanDuel has adjusted him to plus 650. We have plus 500 at fair value. Looking at other sites here for Kittle, second half anytime touchdown score at Bet365 is plus 333, so a massive difference from FanDuel. And then plus 425 at DraftKings, which is closer to in line with our model. So I don't hate if you want to take plus 650. It's just there may not be a need to.
It's so hard, and this is for people who play fantasy. Like these 49ers, that they have so many talented guys to get the ball to, and only one football to distribute among them, and they're all going to have big games here and there. It's really hard to predict who gets it when. And the splits for Kittle when Debo is healthy and active are pretty stark. Like he gets the ball a lot less. He seems to be, out of all the skill position players, he's the one who is most harmed, for lack of a better term, by Debo being on the field. I think they just, run similar kind of routes over the middle of the field and stuff. So that's one where, if something were to happen to Samuel where he's out or we weren't expecting him, I'd feel better about it. But I can't, in good faith, pick out any of the 49ers primary guys individually just because you never know which one it's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Now there is a question in chat about Jawan Jennings plus 2,200. I actually see at FanDuel. We're not quite there at plus 2,200, but I don't hate it. I understand the thought process behind it. What may be more interesting would be something like if this game blows out, then you go to a Ray McLeod or a Ronnie Bell, something like that. I don't hate Ronnie Bell, 45-1, for example, for a second half touchdown at FanDuel, or let's see, it's 22-1 at Bet365. But like, if I'm going to take a sprinkle, I'm going to take it on Ronnie Bell because he's kind of, and we saw this earlier this year, he's kind of the Brandon Ayuk replacement. So if this game blows out, I don't hate a little bit of a sprinkle on Ronnie Bell. I'm not going to do it myself, but if I'm looking at like backups, that's probably where I would look.
Yeah, it's just so hard with backup receivers because a scenario where we expect those guys to be on the field is a scenario where we're not expecting them to throw the ball at all.
Exactly.
So, like, how do you kind of balance those two things out?
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously, it's more comfortable, backup running backs. You're not getting quite the odds like we talked about with an Elijah Mitchell or whatever. So, it's tricky, but, the books have this priced fairly well, I think, for how likely that's going to be with some of these backup players.
Yeah, exactly. So you're exactly right. It's that balance of, okay, the backups are in, but if the backups are in, it's a blowout. And not only is the team that's ahead going to run the ball a lot, but oftentimes the team that's behind. And we actually have this built into our model where we see if this game just like ridiculously blows out, then the team that's trailing also, obviously they're still going to pass more than they did pregame, but it's going to kind of rubber band where instead of being 10 or 15 or 20% extra pass heavy, they come back down to like 8 or 10% pass heavy. So they end up just running the ball out a little bit. So I agree with you there. It's tough to like take some of these backup players, but I think where your mind was earlier at like kind of at the start of halftime, if we have some starters unders, then that's where I want to look. So speaking of that, let's real quick take a look potentially at some starters unders, especially for San Francisco, right? So Christian McCaffrey right now, if we look at him, he has 87 rushing yards. He has, as far as receiving yards, 17. So right now he has 104 total yards. We're projecting him rest of game for about 60, just under 60 total yards. So we have 163 rushing plus receiving yards. So if you can find anywhere that has rushing plus receiving yards, You know, I think under, if you have a 164 available to you or something like that, that might be a good one to take on Christian McCaffrey. But right now, it looks like a lot of places are kind of ghosted out. I see McCaffrey at 149.5. So I think the books are kind of in line with us. Yeah, exactly. They're thinking this is going to be a substitution out spot potentially.
The one McCaffrey under I'd be most interested in is his receptions at 5.5, because even if they leave him out there, we're expecting a lower passing rate. You're probably not going to be throwing it to McCaffrey as much if you're trying to save him anyway. So I think that's probably the best value on that, because it takes away a little bit of the danger of him just breaking a long one on the first one he catches. And if he does, turn the first catch he sees into an 80-yard touchdown, then he probably gets the rest of the day off anyway. So it gives you a little bit of balance there. I think would be my favorite. Don't love it out of all the McCaffrey unders, because they're obviously baking in the chance that he comes out, but that would be my favorite of all the
I
ways
actually
to play
don't hate that, because we're pretty much 50-50 on whether he catches 1.5 more passes, 2 or 1. Or I should say over 1, because there's a good chance of 0 as well. So I don't hate that, especially adding in the fact they'll be run heavy, especially adding in the fact that they don't start with the ball. What was that?
Did you see what the juice is on DraftKings, though? You're going to hate it when I tell you.
I did not see it.
It is minus 220 to the under on DraftKings.
Oh, God. No, we can't do that.
So I was looking at, I was trying to find it. They don't seem to have it on FanDuel. They have the alt receptions that you can only bet the over. So that's not where we're looking. So, yeah, I was excited about it. They had it grayed out at a much better price, and then it came back at minus 220.
I'm gonna real quick look at Bet365 on this one. Christian McCaffrey, yeah, minus 220 is the juice at Bet365 as well. So we can't bet that. Yeah, you at the same time though, you kind of could take the over at plus 175, because we are showing even money on it. With I think some value towards the under, knowing Seattle starts with the ball, potential, subbing out of McCaffrey. So there's potentially a slight bit of value to the over at plus 175, but I think it's too much of a scary situation to do that. So yeah, minus 220.
If you're going to go over, if you wanted any kind of over like that, just take the yardage, because you have way more outs with him. He might not need 2 to go over the 7 more receiving yards he needs. He probably doesn't need to at how efficient he is. So that one is, I would rather go with yardage or things like that if I wanted to over, versus the attempt stuff is where I want to play unders.
Well, yeah, and for his yardage, I mean, his receiving yardage, we have let's see, 15 yards receiving rest of the game. Now that's an average, median, slightly lower than that, 14 receiving yards. So, and that's again because he's getting about 1.5 median catches and closer to 2 average catches, right? Sometimes he'll get 2, 3, 4, 5 in rare situations in this game script. But yeah, we're showing a little bit of value to his over on his yardage rather than his receptions, as we are, of course, out of the second half in Seattle at midfield now.
Oh, you're a little bit ahead of me. I didn't catch that. Let's see what.
Yeah, how do we get we got Seattle kind of shot out of a cannon here. At midfield.
A lot of Zach Charbonnet early. Yeah.
Yep. Another.
I was just about to say, the Charbonnet rushing line is so low. The rush yard, it's still not available on DraftKings. Right. But it was at like 26.5 or something, which seemed crazy low for the de facto starter. But
yeah,
obviously not there now after the explosion.
I know,
so to speak.
So Sean Kerner gave out his over, Charbonnet's over pregame, and now Charbonnet all of a sudden up to 20, I think it is, rushing yards. Yeah, 20 rushing yards. And that's putting it back in range to where he's like 60-40 potentially to go over that 52.5. So if you're on Sean's bet here, we have some life in this one yet, especially if Seattle were to score in this drive. But I think we're gonna conclude it there. We had some leans based off this first drive, but I think we're just gonna kind of conclude it there and enjoy the rest of the game and let you all enjoy your bets as well. So Billy, thank you for hopping on this one. We'll be back on Monday Night Football for Bet What Happens Live. But until then, good luck with your bets, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. and we'll see you Monday.